Hi, everybody, and welcome to Point of Purchase by Geekspeak Commerce. This is a show where we talk about all things retail, e-commerce, strategy, technology, and so much more. And as we always do, we like to bring in experts to share their insights about what's happening in retail and trends that we could definitely all learn from. My name is Isaac Wanzama. I'm the founder and chief strategist of Geekspeak Commerce, and I have the pleasure of being your host for today's episode. This episode of Point of Purchase is the fifth in a series called Canadian Commerce, a spin-off that we created and presented in partnership with our friends over at BrandSpark. So working in the space, we all know that sometimes it's very difficult to get good quality Canadian data, often when we're building strategies and trying to make plans for retail and e-commerce businesses. We're making inferences about about the market based on US information. So this is where BrandSpark comes in and to help us support in the space. We leverage their e-commerce shopper study, which is something they do every year that focuses specifically on Canada and the Canadian shoppers. So with that, we're able to provide really meaningful insight and useful data on a range of categories. And that is what we're going to be doing today. The category we're going to be focusing on is sporting goods and outdoor gear. And as you will hear throughout this episode, it's a category that has a lot of its own nuances, its own patterns and demographics in terms of how people buy and where they buy it and why they purchase that. Obviously, working at Geekspeak, we work with a lot of brands and retailers in this space. So we do see some of these pain points, firsthand. So joining me to dive into this category and talk about all things sporting goods is Mike Bone, VP Consumer Insights at BrandSpark International. Mike, how are you?
Right on. Very good. Thanks for having me in today, Isaac.
Awesome. How did I do that? I got through it?
Oh, perfect intro. Stealing some good talking points from later. But no, you nailed it. It's a category with lots of nuance and a very interesting category. So really excited to talk to you about today.
Absolutely. And it's definitely one that's very timely, given everything that's going on right now. We got the Stanley Cups going on. We got the Euro going on. We got the Olympics going on. And of course, the weather's amazing. So sporting goods, it's just on everybody's mind at the moment.
You got it. Yeah, summer for Canada. Lots of new activities open up. We're obviously a big winter sports country, but lots going on in the summer too. And as a massive lifelong Oilers fan, I'm in sports heaven these days. So every day is hockey day for me right now.
Absolutely, we could see a major upset. We could see history in the making, right?
This is history in the making. When they were down 3-0, I was at Game 3 in Edmonton with my son, and even when they lost that, I still believe. I think they're the team that can do the historical comeback. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not making a prediction. I'm not going Messier with but I am going to say I believe they could do it.
Exactly. Well, before we get too deep into the show, please remember that on this episode, you could also participate and send us questions, whether it's from Mike or myself. Please leave those in the comments, and we'll get into them throughout the episode. So with that, Mike, why don't we get into the episode and get this started? Before we dig too much into the data, tell us about yourself and your role at BrandSpark.
Sure, yeah. So my background, I was a marketing major in university and an accounting minor, kind of an interesting duality there. But I've always had a natural fascination with numbers and stats, even going back as far as being a kid. I played drums in a lot of bands. I was always the band accountant. I'd track sports stats. I'd be the kid with Beckett magazines, for mapping out all the prices for all my hockey and baseball cards. So I've always had this affinity towards numbers. But I've also had a very strong affinity throughout high school and university into business and marketing, communications, consumer behavior, and all that. So going into research for me was really the blend of numbers and marketing together. So it was a really good fit for the industry for me. I did some grad studies in marketing as well with a focus on consumer psychology and decision making, which really is kind of a blend of like social psych, economic theory, and things like that. And then when I was done there, I really wanted to bring kind of that blend of practice and theory to the agency side of research. And so here we are. I've worked for large companies and small. I've been at BrandSpark for 8 years now. We've grown our client list, our categories a lot, our team, doing some really cool things, some of which we'll talk about today. And really my key role at BrandSpark is, after being here for 8 years, a lot of the work I do is on the client services side. And I think one of the things I like to focus on is making sure that my focus is always on crafting the right type of research for our clients to make sure their objectives are covered, and being part of that start to finish, no matter if it's a small project or big. So when I say the right type of research, what I mean is connecting the dots between the problems our clients have and really coming to the table with the best way to do it to instill confidence in them that they can make the best decisions possible.
Fantastic. Yeah, we definitely see the value that BrandSpark has brought to the market, even in the short time we've been working with you folks to put this show together. The insight has been really amazing, and let's dig into that a little bit. The shopper study that we built this episode on, a really valuable tool in terms of providing that information we talked about that is Canada focused. Tell us about the study. Tell us how it's done, and just sort of any background on it.
Yeah, for sure. So with the ecom shopper study, we started back in 2016. At the time, ecom was really starting to take off in Canada. Obviously, it wasn't new, but we really started to see a lot of growth in the channel. And we were really interested to learn more about that, not just at one point in time, but we kind of went into it saying, this is something we need to keep our finger on the pulse of, because we believe it's going to keep growing and evolve too, like in some unpredictable ways as the internet capabilities change as well. And so really what we wanted to do, and you mentioned off the hop in the intro, there was more data out there for the US standpoint, but not a lot from the Canadian consumer standpoint. And so we really wanted to understand the Canadian consumer, how they were behaving online and why. First, for our own curiosity, but also as an offshoot of that is to create content and to help our partners with the research and consulting we do with them. So we can leverage this data to help out with the projects we actively do with them, or just give them extra ideas of things to study. So we dig into a lot in the study. We do it once a year. It's in terms of the study itself, it's 18 plus Canadians. They have to be shopping in an online category every 3 months at a minimum. We usually conduct it in June. This year, we're actually pushing it a bit later. So for any brands listening, there is room to hop on board for this year still if you want to get your category in and have any specific knowledge. It's a nationally representative Canadian sample, really robust sample size of roughly 7,000 Canadians every time we do it, which is much larger than a standard, research and consulting project we would do, or an omnibus or political polling and things like that.
Right, and it's fantastic. I mean, we've definitely in our strategy working with customers in various categories just to build out e-commerce roadmap and begin to think about how they need to position themselves in the market, have leveraged the study, because it really does give you that insight in terms of what are customers thinking, what are they looking at, what is it trending, and how do you begin to build, whether it's PDPs or campaigns to go out to them that actually speak to that. So I think the study itself is awesome. But then you went a little bit further. You actually complemented that study with a pulse survey, specifically on the sporting goods and outdoor category. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we had some extra nuggets for you today on something outside the shopper study. So when we say pulse survey, it's almost like another way of thinking about it that I always say is research on research. So it's us internally doing some research on a category or a brand or an idea. It's not necessarily commissioned by a partner we're working with. It's just something we would like to do. So a couple examples would be if we want to run a pulse survey, during early COVID, we would just do that. It wasn't because a brand asked us to. We just had an ongoing pulse survey to understand people's buying behavior during COVID. One of which we found was, once things settled in a bit, people were treating themselves a lot more. They had more disposable income for that little bit, so they were treating themselves with interesting purchases. So that was some cool data we could feed to our partners, but also use as content. Sometimes we do pulse surveys on inflation or any sort of economic metrics. Today, what we wanted to do was, outside of everything we have in the ecom shopper study, we really wanted to dig into the sports and rec category. You and I had some hypotheses and some ideas we wanted to explore. And so we went and spoke to about 500 Canadians and really dug into, when they're shopping online, what's important to them, what's the purchase process, what sort of factors really play a big impact on their choice,
right?
The impact of brand, all things like that. So we got a lot of cool stats for today.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I can't wait to get into it. So I guess to start, let's define this category a little bit, Mike. When we talk about sporting goods and outdoor gear, what are we talking about? What is a product mix?
Yeah, it's such a broad category relative to others, and I love it for that reason. It encapsulates so many different types of sports, and within each of those sports, there's level of sports from entry level amateur to those that are pretty professional, and the products change depending on which level you're at sometimes. Consumer needs is a big one too. I think it's a fascinating category from both a product development and a creativity and marketing point of view. So it's a really cool one to study. In terms of products, it ranges from workout products and gym equipment to gear and equipment designed specifically for a sport like hockey sticks or golf clubs. Cross sport equipment is out there, apparel and footwear, camping gear, overlanding. There's just so many different areas that we can study. And also, too, on top of that, even when we think about the players in the space, so, outside of the countless individual brands in sporting goods, we have large retailers offering a wide selection of products, like Canadian Tire and Sport Chek. We have the big e-com players like Amazon and Walmart. We have more mid-sized retailers like Mec and Sporting Life doing a lot of great stuff. And then, hyper local shops like in Toronto, we have Merchant of Tennis for racket sports. We have Black Toe Running for everything running that are, hyper focused on one or two sports. So it's very complicated, lots of nuance, but a very exciting category to be in.
Absolutely. I think the Merchant of Tennis is probably one of the best names
Yeah.
store that I've ever heard. But Mike, you kind of raise, behind there's some information around, the type of shopper we're looking at, right? And the change in demographic. Can we talk a little bit about the athlete who's training? I mean, we mentioned the Olympics at the beginning here. Somebody who's competing at the elite level versus a person who's shopping every day. What do we know about how they shop online?
Yeah, it's a great question. Even outside of the athlete versus casual, just even studying those who make fitness and sport part of their lifestyle, just as almost kind of a foundational look. Every time we do research in this area, whether it's the e-com shopper study or this Pulse or other projects we've done with different partners that are custom in nature, from a really foundational standpoint, even from a demographic look, there are some interesting points of view. So every time we conduct research in this space, there are tendencies that pop out with this type of segment relative to like the broad consumer landscape. So first of all, from a very kind of basic point of view from income, they typically tend to earn more from a household income perspective. They over-index on that relative to the general consumer. So it's not necessarily we're saying that they all land in higher income or higher tax brackets or higher income brackets for it. It's just they over-index versus the general consumer. And an outcome of that is that, after they pay for all the needs in their life, their housing needs, utilities, food, streaming services, they tend to have a bit more disposable income. And they will use that towards leisure activities or sports sometimes. Second demographic point is the sweet spot for age is usually 25 to 50. When we tease apart different groups of people who say that being active is really important to their lifestyle and those who do not, we find that the group really over-indexes towards 25 and 50, particularly 30 to 39 age bracket sometimes. So again, it's not to say that younger people and 55 plus aren't engaged in sport
Right.
or not shopping the category. It just means to say that this 25 to 50 is over-indexing and driving the category a bit more.
Fantastic. And before we move on to the question, Mike, you've already shared so much already. Just want to remind our viewers that if you do have questions for myself or Mike on this episode of Point of Purchase, please leave them in the comments. We'll definitely take them up. So let's get into trends a little bit. We kind of alluded this at the top of my cold opening, which I kind of struggled through. Let's talk about trends. The past 12, 18 months has all been about pickleball, which is I think amazing. Then of course we mentioned some other things going on, the NBA finals and the Stanley Cups and so forth. How do trends impact the e-commerce journey or the e-commerce purchase for the consumer?
Yeah, pickleball is a really interesting one. I mean, fastest growing sport in America for I think 2 or 3 years running now. So can't deny the impact of the pickleballers. There's something there. It's an interesting one in the sense that a trend like that, the total addressable market for that sport has obviously grown. But in an interesting way, for pickleball, it's a sport that leans a little light in terms of equipment needs versus other sports. So for instance, the pickleball itself, it gets dead eventually and becomes useless and you have to replace it. But it's not as replaceable as a product that you would purchase relative to, let's say, tennis balls or golf balls, especially if you're losing them in the woods like I do. Paddles themselves don't have as much breakage as other sports like hockey sticks, bats, restringing tennis rackets that would require replacement purchasing. So, there's a lot going on there, especially if you think about like the heavy user versus the casual user. So let's say a trend like pickleball, it recruits a lot of people that are light into the sport and just kind of play recreationally once or twice a month. It might not impact sales too much because they're probably not going to need replacement goods very often.
Right.
I know you're a runner. There's the pretty standard practice of like, once you run 500 to 800K in a pair of shoes, you should replace them. And
Right.
so, if you're a casual runner, you probably don't have to buy shoes every year, but Isaac, you might be buying shoes every 6 months, right? So all those things kind of come into play when we're thinking about trends in sports and their effect on online purchase and in-store purchase as well.
Right.
One thing I think that pickleball can do as a trend, which is really interesting, is this idea of like seasonal smoothing. So if it's a sport that can be played inside in Canada and outside, what this might do is make the sales cycle a bit more predictable and smooth it out during the year, as
Right.
opposed to, some sports that are just like hyper seasonal, that really kind of have massive ebbs and flows in their sales cycle, like hockey, golf, and winter sports.
Yeah, and really interesting, Michael. One of the things you did mention earlier is that as Canadians, we're more like a winter sport versus summer sport country. Is that actually showing up in conversions and sales, or is it just like a general statement there?
It's one thing. It's not necessarily that you could be the type of person that's one or the other.
Right.
Some people that are winter sport people just have different sports they do in the summer, right? So so it's kind of like you're motivated by whatever season you're in. So it's not necessarily something where we segment on, but I do think through just kind of knowledge of being a consumer myself, but also work we've done, the sales cycle and the production cycle in some sports really is quite seasonal relative to something that's fairly consistent over the year. Hockey being one of them.
Fantastic. That's good to know. Now, here's a stat that I found really interesting out of your study, that 60% of shoppers in this category go directly to the retailer site instead of a search engine. And then further, 36% of those shoppers search for a specific brand. I thought that was really cool because we all expect that search is where the customer journey begins. But what can retailers and brands do with that information?
Yeah, and that 60% for sporting goods category, when we look at it overall across all the categories we have in the shopper study, it's actually a number that's been increasing over time. So we trend this once a year, which is really cool to see.
Right.
So it's not like a big jump every year, but over the past 3 or 4 years, we have seen that this reliance on going directly to retail site and less so on search engine is actually, the gap is increasing, which is really interesting to think about. The 60% number for me is a really interesting one. It insinuates that retailers and brands are doing a pretty good job of being top of mind with consumers right now.
Right.
And that holds up for other categories too, like in pet care, cosmetic, personal care. But the flip side of it is the 40%, right? So I still think as marketers, we have more work to do to close that gap through advertising and shopping experience. How can we become and stay top of mind consumers in the category so that they're even more likely to go directly to the site, and we don't have to worry about showing up in search results or competitors like that. I think sporting goods and outdoor gear are in a pretty good spot in this respect. That behavior to go right to the site is better than other categories like home improvement or auto parts and accessories. But I still think we do have some room to grow. And then the brand effect is interesting too. So the brand effect isn't as strong as it is in other categories like cosmetics, pet care, household care from an overall level.
Right.
And we see that in the e-com shopper study and the Pulse study that we were talking about today, where brand, while it's important, sometimes isn't as important of other criteria when consumers are shopping online.
Absolutely. This is something we could definitely dig into. Yeah, because so what it sounds like you're saying is that I'm more likely to go to sportcheck.ca to look for my shoes than go to Google and trying to find results and then end up on sportcheck.ca.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, in knowing that, one thing that brands, can keep their focus on is continuing to make really strong links with their customers,
right?
And communicating with them at a healthy rate after the purchase with the right imagery, the right messaging, because understanding your consumer and what's important to them, I think, is absolutely critical, no matter what category you're in. But I think particularly the sports and rec. So send emails, but not too many. Don't send too many sale and price discounting emails. Tell them about your brand story. Get them excited, even if they are planning for their next purchase anytime short term. Some great examples I can think of brands that I follow and have connected with are Patagonia and On Shoes.
Right.
Content I get from them is inspiring. It's educational. It's interesting. I don't really feel like I'm getting sold something when they're connecting with me. They just want to update me on all the cool stuff they're doing and who they're doing it with in the space. And then naturally, when I need a new pair of road runners or trail runners, On Shoes is typically always top of mind for me in my consideration set of, New Balance, On, and Nike is kind of my top 3. So just staying top of mind and giving your customers the right kind of content, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we know quite a bit of here at GS. So let's talk, kind of carry that into the PDP. So I've come to the page. I'm looking at, for a product where it's shoes or skis or hockey stuff, whatever the case is. What are consumers telling us about what needs to be on that page to help them learn about the product and to ultimately pick the product that's right for them.
Yeah, what we did with the pulse survey is we wanted to study this aspect at 3 different levels. So first we asked them, in terms of all the features and aspects we're going to show you, what are important to you to make you first notice a product, like really to turn you on to it. And then we had a different stage, which was which of these are really going to push you towards seeking out more info or kind of digging into product information. And then kind of later stage, which of these are really impacting your consideration of the product. And a couple interesting things happened. So first of all, price was the number 1 factor at all 3 stages. So price is really important. You got to get price right. It has to be visible. And it was really important overwhelmingly at the early stage of making someone notice a product and at the later stage in consideration. But there's a couple other key things at play too. So, I'll start at the start of the funnel. So if you're first noticing a product, price is really important. After that came product details and specs. And then after that came design and style. Okay? So you got to get that right. If you're getting one of those quick looks on the website,
right,
you have to find those top 3. Once people were drilling down into seeking out more information, price was still number 1, but product details and specs almost tie it. So that becomes very important. And then ratings and reviews and recommendations start to pop up as a top 3. So people start to care about what others think, and that kind of social proof of, is this good or not?
Right.
And then when you think lower funnel consideration, price is still number 1, but reviews and recommendations and ratings pop up to number 2. So they become very important at the final choice set. If you've noticed, I never said brand at any point. So brand never cracked the top 3 during this purchase journey. What's interesting though is that's at the overall kind of customer level we were surveying.
Right.
But when we drill down to only those who say, having an active lifestyle is super important to them, people that consider themselves athletes, just those that are very engaged in sports and fitness, with that group, brand becomes quite important. And I find that to be, it makes sense, but it's also so fascinating to see in the data, especially with the early stage, they're seeking out brand. And that makes a lot of sense because the more engaged you are in the category, the more experience you have with products and the more you rely on them, right? Like the shoes you use or the racket you use or the stick you play with in hockey, it's a tool to, executing on the activity you want to execute on. And it becomes an extension of yourself. Right. And I think that we tie our performance with the product, and that makes the product really important. And that makes brand very sticky. So the opportunity for loyalty and stickiness is quite strong with those that are highly engaged in the sports category.
Right. Really quite interesting. I'm actually going to segue a little bit on that point. I mean, we talked about the athlete who knows the product, knows what they need. Can you kind of talk a little bit to the mom or the dad who's buying the product on behalf of their child? Maybe their teen or their teen who's just starting to play, tennis. What are they looking for in terms of information to help them make those decisions?
It's interesting. We one of the projects we do every year ask this question directly. Because we actually survey the parents of the kids that are in the sports, not the kids themselves at times. And the impact on the decision-making process varies depending on the age of the child. The older the child gets, the more opinionated they will be about which brand and model they should buy. And right. Will be more open to it. But in younger years, the parents kind of a bit more in the driver's seat. Right. And price becomes a pretty big issue, right? So there are things at play. But typically, yes, the parent is usually somewhat involved to highly involved in the decision-making process, right? Especially when the child's living at home in those early years.
Right. That's fantastic. Yeah. So in thinking about merchandising and marketing, you got to figure out who the influencers and who the actual purchase decision maker is in that journey, right?
That's right. You got to market the superstars to the kid,
right? And
then you got to get your price points and stocking correct with the parents.
For mom and dad. Awesome. So let's carry on that conversation around price. Again, another interesting stat here. So 50% of sporting goods shoppers expect the price to be lower online, but then at the same time, 22% of them are willing to pay more for the convenience of shopping online. Can you reconcile those 2 points of data?
Yeah, I think it's a bit category dependent in this one. And like you said, it's 50% expect prices to be lower online, and then there's 46% saying they want it the same. So basically, you can just think of almost everyone thinks that for sporting goods, prices should be the same or lower online. Like no one's saying they're okay with them being higher.
Right.
It doesn't jive. So you're not going to get any bonus points for charging more than your in-store offer. So that's kind of your standpoint. I think what it says about the consumer in this sporting goods space is that they know they have options. They're rarely in a bind to make a purchase. There's very few times they absolutely need to make a purchase on any given day relative to something like, food and beverage, cosmetics, pet care, healthcare. So, if they're okay with not needing to try something on and having it fit, they become first open to online versus in-store.
Right.
So they're more open to online. And then if you can check that box, as long as the online channel is the same price or better, and the availability of their color or model is there, then they're cool with buying online. But I think then it's like they don't want to pay a large premium just to get a bit more convenience because there isn't that urgency.
Right.
And so while there is a segment that is willing to pay for that extra convenience, I think 22% was the number. So there is a segment that is willing to pay for it.
Right.
That's a small group. It's a small component of the space. So, if you make the assumption that there isn't urgency with everyone and that they know they have options, you're probably better off just making sure that your MSRP is the same or better as a standard. Right. And then make your delivery non-offensive. Like just keep it standard, right? Like make it a fair price and a rational number of days it takes. So as opposed to free shipping and like fast, but at a higher price, I think there's just less urgency there. So you can probably get away with not doing that.
Right.
Most people in the segment, at least.
Yeah, and keep some of those margins to yourself. So naturally, when you talk about online and selling online, you open up the competition, right? Because literally anybody that can put up a website is competing with you. A stat here says 47% of shoppers bought an item on Amazon, their last item on Amazon, compared to 53 of all the other retailers combined. To me, that's like mind-blowing. So while we're building strategies for our retail store, we know there's a behemoth out there. What are brands doing? What can they even do to begin to compete with the likes of Amazon?
Yeah, it's the Amazon number is staggeringly high,
right?
And the number you cited was from the e-com shopper study. We
right.
actually found an insanely similar number with the pulse survey we did too, with Amazon being roughly about the same percentage relative to other retailers. So yeah, big player. I think everyone knows that Amazon has put a lot of stock over the years into their product pages and their ratings and reviews. They've really optimized that through behavior and tracking over time to really nail those. They're just really well laid out. They're really optimized for people's eye tracking and behavior. So for brands, I think everyone's adapted, and product pages in general are pretty good. But knowing how strong Amazon is, you just have to emulate what they're doing as best possible while still keeping what you're doing unique and staying true to your positioning and what you want.
Right.
So try to take the best of what Amazon is doing and then curate it to your own aspect. A couple of things that stand out in the pulse survey. We asked a couple extra questions near the end. We just were really wanting to understand what would drive people online versus in store. Like what are the tiebreakers in some way?
Right.
So we had some general questions of that. A couple ones popped out that were pretty cool. So we asked about if there were better sizing guides online that would give you, a really specific way to compare against the fit of other brands' clothing. Right. Would that drive people online to buy clothes more often? And we found, there was an overwhelming response that yes, better sizing guides would help. And so that's an area where you can beat Amazon on. I know in the past, I forget which brand specifically had it, but I think I was buying some running shorts or something. They asked me as I was going through, what other brands do I buy that fit me well? And they'd have a huge other list.
Right.
Click through a couple different brands. And then they'd say, well, when you bought Reebok last time, what size are you? And I would do all these things. And then, they said, okay, well, wait a second. AI is calculating your fit. I don't think it was AI. I think it was just probably some sort of spreadsheet that, some person in the background figured out. But it was interesting because based on what I told them about other brands I wear and that fit me well and their knowledge of the specific size of those, then they gave me a really specific size that I should buy for their brand. And I just remember walking away thinking, that makes me feel a lot more comfortable that this is going to be okay. Like they've really thought this through, and it's not just a sizing guide that's a picture telling me to go grab a measuring tape and measure my midsection.
I don't know who's
doing that. Who's doing that? Like, oh yeah, let me just get my, measuring, like my paper clothing measuring tape that I keep around the desk. Like,
right.
Even if I had one, I don't even know if I would get it right. So
Right.
Doing something like that, I think, could help brands out, just like more creative, more specific sizing guides that will make people feel more comfortable. Product information was another thing we asked about. So the statement was, if the product information available was more comprehensive, I would shop online more often. Not
Right.
quite as strong as the result of the sizing guide, but still overwhelmingly like, yes, comprehensive product info is great. Especially love it when it's like, there's a bit of product info or specs, and then there's like a read more or click more. So
Right.
it's not overwhelming on the web page, gives you a bit. And for those who really want the info, pop down a bit more. That kind of stuff I think can help a lot stand out.
Yeah, I mean, the UX design is definitely a big part of that experience that we try to get right all the time. We're going to talk about innovation in a moment, but I got a quick question that's come in on LinkedIn. Mike, could you talk about brand loyalty in this category? And I know we kind of said brand doesn't always drive what we're looking for as consumers, but maybe you could comment on that from your study.
Yeah. Even on top of the study we do, the other custom work we will do in the space with our partners, I find that any sort of metrics we get in our research around brand loyalty or satisfaction are always incredibly high and resilient relative to other categories we study. There's not as much brand switching. I think it really stems from the idea that a large part of people in sporting goods and in other certain categories we study are just very passionate people. They're very enthusiastic.
Right.
So when they find a brand they like, and it doesn't matter like why you like it, whether you just think it looks rad or it worked well or it held up or I don't know, your friend uses it too. Once you love that brand, I think that love is pretty solid and you're kind of willing to be a fan of the brand. And I think that translates into loyalty as long as the product doesn't let you down. So
Right.
with high loyalty comes high expectations. And so while the figures we usually see for loyalty can be quite high and sticky, the consumers in this space on the flip side get very let down if the product's quality starts to suffer, or if there's product issues. They might give the brand one chance, but they know there's a lot of other great brands out there too. So it's kind of a twofold thing, but it is a category that, if you're a brand in the space, it's good and bad. It's great that your customers are loyal to you. It's a challenge to convert your non-customers over to you because that loyalty might exist for your competitor as well.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point because I think brands, and we've spoken about Nike a few times here, they spend a lot of time and effort building that brand promise. This is what we stand for. This is what we're known for. And as long as they continue to deliver on that, which sometimes they falter, they're going to maintain that loyalty. Even when they do, how do they handle that? And I think that's what customers really care about when they think about who they're buying their products from. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. We touched on the PDPs a little bit, and just how we're engaging and connecting with the customers once we finally get them to our page. So let's talk about innovations on that page. How's technology impacting how we're selling our products? So I'm thinking here, let's talk about how try-ons are becoming a way of selling product. Let's talk about AR. Let's even talk about the metaverse, because that was a time where worlds were being built and virtual worlds, and actually Walmart just released a realm the other day. But how's technology impacting sales and how we're selling things in this category?
Yeah, the jury still might be out on metaverse, but it'll be interesting to see the next iteration. I remember back in the day, we researched Second Life, which was kind of almost like the first.
Yeah, of course, that was the first metaverse.
It was, yeah, it was very, very primitive metaverse, but we studied it because a lot of brands were actually setting up virtual shops in Second Life.
Right.
And so we did some work there on the use of brands and also how you shape your avatar relative to your actual self. It was pretty interesting times.
Right.
But I think AR has come a long way and is actually substantially helping brands do some very, specific capabilities that I think are almost like engaging right away. Like the metaverse might be a jump for some people, but AR I think is just almost very, very obvious in its usage sometimes.
Right.
So I know Under Armour, Nike, New Balance have all had virtual try-ons with AR, which I think is great. You're not going to feel the shoe on your foot, but if you're interested in style and color and kind of general size, I think it's a great way to, for a first check to say like, yes, I like this or no, I don't, before you start going down that path of going in store to try it on or just taking a chance and just buying online. So I think the AR in that makes a lot of sense. Customization wise is really cool too. CCM in the hockey space is doing some really cool stuff. They have a 3D fit scanner for skates. So you're getting custom skates that are really going to fit your foot well and feel and fit and proper fit for skates is paramount for actual output and how fast you can skate and how you are on your edges. So that sort of technology and optimization is really cool. They're also doing a lot of work with like safer helmets, different like sort of tech lattice work within the helmets for better fit and better protection for hockey players. So there's a lot going on in the sports space in terms of, feel and fit, but also safety. Really cool stuff going on.
Right. And I wonder, is this like a brand / retailer response to, a younger consumer, a Gen Z consumer that's naturally engaging with all these different multimedia tools, through, we got filters, we got snaps, we got, things happening on TikTok. Is that a bit of a response to, let me meet my customer to where they are?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's one more way to meet them where they are and to stay top of mind and to drive interest, right?
Right.
Even if that AR try-on isn't ultimately the number one factor of why they make the purchase, it's still a really cool extra part of the journey for them, relative to other brands that maybe aren't doing it. So I think you nailed it. I think that there's, especially if the ROI is great on it, it just adds to that experience and adds to the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen the luxury brands jump on it. You could try on Gucci bracelets and Tiffany earrings without having to go there, which is awesome. Mike, this is an awesome conversation. We're just coming to the end here. And as I think about the shopper study and some of the things that you've said, some really amazing stuff, what are in your mind are some of the key takeaways that, brands and retailers that are listening to the show right now, what do they need to think about as they plan for the rest of 2024 and going into 2025?
Yeah, couple big outcomes from it. So I think we already talked about this a bit. This idea of bypassing search engines has become more habitual, and we're seeing that every year. So, and that's regardless of category. So shoppers are traveling directly to retail and brand websites more often and using apps. So the importance of the landing page and the UX is going to become more and more important.
Right.
Preference towards smartphones relative to desktop and laptop is increasing even more. Right. So app usage and site usage needs to be super slick on smartphone, like, mobile optimized first, but still obviously useful on desktop. Very, very important there. And then another one, price checking and reading reviews are the most common activities among shoppers. So even though we want to talk about, new color design, product specs that we all think are exciting from a marketing and engineering product point of view,
right.
Let's not forget that price and reading reviews are incredibly important in the journey from start to finish. And most people now, I think, we've all shopped online so much now that we're pretty used to it. We know what we like and we don't like.
Right.
And I think brands have learned from that. So we don't really see a lot of notable issues with shipping anymore or product listings. Those almost seem like table stakes. Like good shipping and the right product info are table stakes at this point. Obviously, keep trying to optimize with the product info to see what people need to know versus, what they can read about in different forums or articles. But pressing on all those buttons, I think, is going to continue to be important while we're still innovating and thinking up really cool marketing ways to gain people's attention and interest in the product.
Right. No, those are all very, very fantastic points, Mike. So, you and I are obviously in the e-com /tech /digital /data space. So we look at this from a professional standpoint, but we're also shoppers ourselves, right? I buy all kind of things online. So tell us, Mike, what was the last thing you bought online and how was that experience?
Yeah, I buy a decent amount online. I'm kind of like a in-store /online hybrid guy for sports.
Right.
When it comes to apparel and shoes, I'm okay with buying it online because once I buy a brand once and I know how it fits, usually I'm pretty comfortable with how it will fit next time. For equipment, I'm very much an in-store tactile person that I need to feel it. Couple recent examples I can think of some really great experiences. On shoes and New Balance have always been kind of my top two I go to. So I'm usually on the On Shoes site for quite a while. They have a really great shoe finder that takes you through a series of questions. So, they want to know if you're road running or trail running. They want to know, is it, you're training for a long distance or short distance? Do you need cushioning or are you okay with not much? You go through all this and it kind of gives you really great suggestions on what shoes would be great for you. And I've wanted this one set of trail shoes for a couple of years now. I finally got the color I wanted, and just the experience on their website front to back is a really pleasing one for me. And then, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, the content they provide me with, I think, is really cool. So they're doing great stuff. Another one, I did treat myself to a pair of custom Nike shoes, kind of mid-pandemic, the Nike for You, and that experience was really cool. So It was the React Infinity 2 I got, and I let my kids actually pick out every aspect of my shoe. So they're like these super wild shoe with like seafoam green and purple and pink laces and retro logos. And there was just so many cool elements because we could build it on the page together. Once I made the order, they would send me shipping updates with the image of my shoe saying like, hey, we started production on your shoe. It's going to be here in a couple weeks. When I got the box, instead of the model name, it said my name. The loops on the back of my shoe have my kids' initials. So whenever I run, they're kind of like with me. There's just a lot of cool elements with that I don't know. I just had a lot of brand love for Nike after that. And I'm not even a huge Nike guy, but they forced themselves into my consideration set now, just from having that extra special experience, which I think was really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's such a fantastic story. We talk about how we begin to differentiate ourselves. I mean, you could do it with all this, items we talked about, but ultimately how you connecting with your customer. The fact that they created this experience using tech that engaged you and your family in a product that they were selling. You weren't thinking about the product, you're thinking about the time you were having with your kids, and you're still talking about it. And ultimately, that's the brand as we want. And just for the record, I do not run 800 kilometers a year.
I don't believe you.
Thanks for that, Mike. I do want to thank you so much for your time today. I think you've offered such a high value conversation to both our retail and brand listeners. There's a lot to learn here. This is the point of this conversation, right? We just want to all collectively be better in terms of how we put our best foot forward for our business and for our customers. For everybody watching, thank you so much for watching Point of Purchase. Mike, if we want to find out more about the study and more about BrandSpark, what's the best way to go about that?
Absolutely. You can connect with myself or my colleague Phil Scrutton on LinkedIn if you'd like. Also, you go to the BrandSpark website, you can reach out for our general kind of info link, and that will get to us as well. So anytime you want to reach out to us for any questions about the study, or if you'd like to get interested in hopping on the next iteration of the study, please reach out. We'd love to talk.
Fantastic. And I highly, highly encourage you looking at that study. Really, really great and valuable tool. We are GeekSpeak Commerce, so follow us and check us out at geekspeakcommerce.com. And I look forward to our next episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.